Welcome to the third annual Celebrating Graphic Novels workshop, brought to you through the partnership of Telling Tales and the Hamilton Public Library. I'm Naomi Brunn, Youth Services Program Development Manager at the Hamilton Public Library, and I'm thrilled to bring the fun of this graphic novel workshop right to your home, this year through the magic of digital technology. HPL has partnered with Telling Tales since their very beginning because we share a mission. We promote literacy by connecting the young readers to inspiring storytellers like the one I'm about to introduce. Sylv Chiang is a middle grade teacher by day and a middle grade author by night. She writes books that gets kids to put down their video game controllers, at least for a while. Her stories are about friendship, video games, and being true to yourself. Sylv is here to help you discover your superpower by creating your own avatar. If you haven't done so already, download Sylv's activity sheets at tellingtales.org and go to Celebrating Graphic Novels event page, or go ahead and make your own by following along. Sylv, I think my superpower is super reading. What's your superpower?
Wow, super reading. Naomi, that is a really cool superpower. I can not even imagine the things you could get done if you could read everything super fast. I'm actually not going to tell you my superpower just yet. I'm going to tell you mine later. But first I want to say good morning to everyone. I'm really happy to be here as part of Celebrating Graphic Novels. Today we're going to talk about superpowers in gaming. We're going to talk about my superpower, but then most importantly, we're going to try to figure out what your superpower is and talk about how to make the most of it. So I am the author of the 3 books that you're going to see here in a second. Well, you see them now, but they're in a different order. Here's the 3 books in the correct order. So I'm the author of the Crossup Series, published by Hackmatack Press. The first book is the blue book. You see there, it's Tournament Trouble. The second book is Anyone's Game, and the third book is Rising Star. Anyone's Game is the most well-known right now here in Ontario because it was nominated for the Silver Birch Award as part of the Forest of Reading. That's a Children's Choice Award that actually is going to be announced the winners next Tuesday, June 16th on CBC Books. And if you watched Kevin Sylvester's presentation on Wednesday, the Oodling and Doodling and Noodling presentation, he also has a book that's going to be featured there. It's in a different category though, so we're not competing. It's in the
congratulations on the nominations. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, so Anyone's Game is also nominated in BC for the Red Cedar, and Tournament Trouble is nominated in Atlantic Canada for the Hackmatack. So lots of children got to read these books this year, so hopefully some of those are watching right now. And Rising Star was just released in the fall. So again, I want to make sure I'm really clear. I'm the author of these books. I'm not the illustrator. The illustrator is Connie Choi, and you can see her name under mine where it says Art by Connie Choi on the covers. So the Crossups books are about a young gamer named Jaden. You can see him here sitting on the couch with his friends Devesh and Hugh. He's 12 years old and he loves to play video games like a lot of kids. And he's really, really talented. He's really good at video games. So in the first book, he's invited by a mysterious gamer to a really big tournament to battle live, and that's his dream. The problem is his mom doesn't even know he plays these games. She totally wouldn't approve. And you know, it's a bit of a violent game. I'm not sure what games people out there play. I know that my own kids lately are playing Lego Marvel Superheroes. They are probably currently playing Minecraft while I do this presentation. I imagine there are some fans of Fortnite out there. And then there are some people who probably just screamed, "Ew, Fortnite." It's kind of controversial depending on what camp you're in. But I bet no one watching right now plays Jaden's favorite game, Crossups, and that's because I made it up. So Crossups is a 2D fighting game. It's the name of the series, but it's also the name of the game that Jaden likes to play. And so here's an image from the first book. And you can see there's 2 people battling one-on-one. It's kind of like the Street Fighter games, if you've heard of those, except that the characters turn into these mythical creatures when they do their super moves. So the reason that it's considered violent, especially by Jaden's mom, who's very anti-violence, is that there's a lot of fighting, punching, kicking, blood goes flying, and they do these super moves, and you can see the health meter across the top. They're when your health meter is empty, you're knocked out or KO. This image actually I noticed I think is one of the ones we had to change. This is a pre-publication image. It really should be Kygo, whose health bar is empty, not Blaze. But yeah, so KO stands for knocked out. It's one of those ones that people sometimes don't recognize because knock sounds like it starts with an N, but really it starts with a K. But I know some of you watched Tori talking about knock jokes yesterday, so you probably know this. Anyways, as you can see, Connie Choi, the illustrator, did an amazing job of showing the action and the movement in the video game scenes. So if you haven't read any of the Crossups books, or maybe you've read them, but it's been a while, I'll just show you some of the video game characters so we can talk about their superpowers, as that's kind of important for our presentation. So here, I'm going to actually go from the right side to the left of the screen, just it's backwards, but that's how it makes sense to me in this particular instance. So these are the characters in their human form before they do their super moves. So on the very right, we have Lyris, who is the unicorn cross. That's why they're called Crossups, because they crossed with this mythical creature. So in her unicorn form, she can use her horn to spear, and she has these powerful hooves. Next to her is Saki, who's the Yeti cross. Yeti, also known as Bigfoot or Abominable Snowman. And he uses his breath for sending frosty air at his opponents and creates these massive snowstorms. Cantu is the Hydra cross. She has these 9 snake heads, and each of those heads can attack, which is super helpful. And then there's Blaze. Blaze is a phoenix cross, and if you've read any of the Harry Potter books, you're familiar with the Firebird, the phoenix, and uses these huge wings to send shock waves into opponents, and also has the ability to shoot fiery feathers. And then the very left is Kygo, who's the dragon cross. And well, dragons are awesome, and he can breathe fire and fireballs and spin like a tornado of smoke and decimate everything in his path. So those are the super moves, superpowers, and kind of related to the mythical creatures that they are crossed with. So if any readers have read all the Crossups books, they might be looking at this image and thinking, this picture is not in any of the books. That's because this is a character sketch made by, or I guess a number of character sketches made by Connie Choi when we were first getting Tournament Trouble ready for publication. So I thought that since celebrating graphic novels is about illustrated works, people might be interested to hear a little bit about the art side of things. And so I'm going to take a few minutes to explain the process of an author and an illustrator working together, at least the way it was for Connie Choi and myself working on the Crossup series. So again, I am the author. I wrote the story, and when I wrote the story, I did not envision Tournament Trouble having any images at all. It wasn't just a novel in my mind, but the publisher, Ennick Press, wanted pictures, and they found Connie Choi. So that's important to know, is that it's always the publisher and the editor from the publishing house that will find your illustrator. You don't need to find your own illustrator if you're writing a book. And the first thing that the illustrator does when they're hired is that they'll be asked to do character sketches. So these sketches you're looking at right now are probably like the final sketches or pretty close to it for the video game characters in Tournament Trouble, but there would have been several rounds before that. So here are some example, or an example of some early sketches. In this one here, you can see that on the left is Jaden, on the right is Callie, and they're dreaming about playing video games. So this image would have been sent to the editor, who would have passed it on to me for my feedback. And in this case, both the editor and I agreed that the children looked a little bit too young. Sorry, one second. So Connie made some adjustments, and she aged them up a little bit more, and there was some back and forth. I mean, for the most part, she always really nailed the characters. Their looks were always great. They kind of matched their personality. And yeah, once all the character sketches were finalized and agreed upon, the next step is for the illustrator to sketch out some of the scenes. So some rough sketches of scenes from the novel. And those scenes might be ones that inspire the illustrator herself, that she, when she read it, said, oh, this would be fun to draw. Other ones might be ones that I or the editor flagged as we thought they had great illustration potential. Now there are some constraints. We can't just pick all the art in, all the art going into the first half of the book, and then there's no art left for the second half. So we do need to spread it out evenly. But for the most part, yeah, it's just kind of picking scenes that we think would make a good image. So on this next slide, you'll see the two images of the same scene. So sometimes, because Connie is so creative, she would send us more than one option of how we could look at a scene. So this one is looking at the boys on the couch from 2 different angles. So this is the very first sketch in the first book. So that kind of had something to do with how we made our decision of which version to go with. Can you guess which one we went with? Because I actually showed it to you a few minutes ago if you were watching. Yeah, so it's the one of the boys facing straight at us. And the reason we selected that one is because it is early in the book and we really want to be able to see the characters and focus on them and see what they look like, etc. So this is the difference between a rough sketch, early sketch, and a final illustration. So all communication went from myself to the editor to Connie, and from the Connie to the editor to me. The editor makes all the final decisions, but I have to say my input was always respected and listened to and taken into account. And usually we all agreed by the final version of the art. So that was a bit about the process of an author working with an illustrator. But now let's get back to Jaden and the Crossups characters and superpowers, which is the focus of our presentation. So remember how I said that video game characters can all transform in Crossups? So here you can see that at the top left above Jaden, you can see Kygo with his dragon version in the background. In the top right is Blaze with the phoenix. Then we see Cantu on the bottom right with the Hydra heads, and then on the bottom, very bottom, is Lyris with the unicorn. This is not a scene from the game. This is a scene where actually, Jaden is thinking about all these characters. He's really angry and he's considering whether he should do something violent. He's got all this rage, and these characters are representing that. But I like this picture because it kind of gives us an idea of that idea of having 2 sides, because I think that we all have 2 sides to us or more, right? We're not one-sided, and just like these avatars, we can all change and transform. We can all become better, stronger, faster, smarter, kinder. We're always striving to be that super version of ourselves. So Jaden has all these characters to choose from when he plays Crossups, but he's really drawn to Kygo. Kygo, maybe because he's the Dragon Cross, and like I said before, dragons are awesome, but he's pretty awesome and cool in his human form too. He's powerful, he's confident, he's basically everything that Jaden is not. So at least he's not those things in real life. So when Jaden is Kygo, he gets to own any opponent. He gets to be in control. When tournament trouble starts, he hasn't lost a game in months. He tries other avatars, but he connects the most to Kygo because Kygo represents what Jaden wants to become. So when Kygo wins a game, he has this win quote, which comes up on screen. You need more confidence to beat me. Jaden is not a confident guy, at least not at the start of the series. He does really grow. He grows more confident in each book, and he learns to stand up for himself, stand up for his friends. And by book 3, believe it or not, he actually runs for student council, which is something you could never imagine of the Jaden that starts out in tournament trouble. So it's important, really important to understand that people can change just like Jaden changes. Just because you're not good at something now doesn't mean you can't learn that skill. In education, we call that having a growth mindset. Basically, it just means that people can change. And I know because I sure have changed. Do you agree? Have I changed? So this is me in grade 1. Maybe you can see some resemblance. So some things have changed, but other things have really stayed the same. So if you had asked this 6-year-old what she wanted to be when she grew up, the answer would have been an author. And you know, that just shows that I had that passion for books and stories already at 6 years old. I truly believe now that the fact that I said that out loud, I imagined myself as an author, I envisioned it happening. It really helped me to reach that goal in the end. It took a while. It took a long while. That's a whole nother presentation, but here I am. I am an author. What's your superpower? Are you disappointed that writing is my superpower? I know it's kind of obvious, but I don't know. Were you expecting I would tell you that I could fly or disappear or that I have telekinesis? If I had one of those superpowers, and I'm not saying that I do, would it be a good idea to tell people about it? I mean, really, I saw the X-Men movie. They were treated pretty badly. Plus, a superpower is only best if you use it by surprise, right? Those kinds. But let's think about it. I really do, in my opinion, think that being an author is a superpower. I have the power to take people to whole new worlds. Have you ever gotten so lost in a book that you forgot where you were? Or even better, have you ever read a book and it changed the way that you think about the world? That's powerful, right? If you could make people see things differently. I know that some of you out there are looking at me right now and thinking of me as a muggle because of Harry Potter, right? Like, come on. But let's talk about you. Today, we're going to see if we can come up with your superpower. And it all starts with figuring out what is your passion. So your passion is something that you love to do. It fascinates you, or you're driven to this activity. For me, my passion is stories. For Jaden, his passion is video games. There are endless possibilities for what your passion could be. Usually, if I'm doing a school visit, this is the part where I get kids to share their passions with each other, so we get some examples. A lot of times I'll get passions or hear about passions in the arts. So maybe your passion is acting or singing or dancing, drawing. Hopefully, or I imagine a lot of people have drawing because this is a graphic novel celebration. A lot of people have passions in the sports. So they might be passionate for basketball or swimming or baseball, so many possibilities, martial arts. But there's a real wide variety. Maybe you're passionate about underwater basket weaving. So I can't hear your passions right now, but I hope that at the end of all this, you will send in your art to our creativity club. And by seeing what you've drawn for me as your superpower and your avatar, I will get a good idea of what your passion is. So we'll hopefully get to share those that way. So probably some of you maybe even have more than one passion. If you don't have one passion only, you can write down a bunch of them, you know, maybe scribble down your passions. That's normal. Most people have more than one passion in their lifetime. Sometimes it changes every week. But I know that when I've talked to adults about what they're passionate about in life, most of the time it's something that was already important to them when they were young. So, you know, and maybe you haven't discovered your passion yet, but maybe just think about what are some of the things you really like. What are some of the things you want to get better at in life that you think would be great, okay? So if you're not sure what it is yet, I think this next slide is important because what's most important about deciding what your passion is making sure that you're being true to you. It's your passion. Make sure your passion is the passion related to the real you. It may not be the same thing as what your parents dream for you. It may not be what other people think is cool. It may not be, you know, something that you've heard other people be passionate about before. Maybe it's something new. But don't get sidetracked by your friends' passions. We need all kinds of passions in the world. We need all kinds of people in the world. We can't all want to be an author, right? That would be really boring. But wouldn't it be sad if no one wanted to be an author? So we do need some. So make sure the passion that you decide on, that you wrote down, is really your passion and it has to do with you, okay? So now is the part of the program where it would be helpful for you to pull out your design your own avatar worksheet. This is available on the website. You'll recognize that it has art by Connie Choi on it again. It has Kaigo and Cantu on the sides. And yeah, don't worry if you don't have it. I mean, really, you can draw on any paper. It doesn't matter if it has other avatars around it or not. But if you could, just get yourself something to sketch and draw with and some kind of paper. And today we're going to make a project to help you remember your passion. So you're going to draw yourself as a video game avatar, doing your super move. So remember how the Crossups characters, they have a super move when they transform. What would your superpower be, right? What would it be if it's related to your passion? So for example, for me, if I was to draw my avatar, maybe I would be weaving my opponent into a trance with my stories, right? Mesmerizing them. If your passion is basketball, maybe your superpower might involve like a slam dunking effect. So you're going to draw you in your super form, doing your super move. And I think it would be really cool if you could relate it to your passion, to something that you want to get better at or something that you just hope to achieve in your life. And here's why. Remember how I told you when I was 6 years old and I said, I'm going to be an author, that I really think that that helped me to eventually be an author? Well, I was verbalizing my goal, right? I was telling the universe what I wanted to be. So you need to know where you want to end up and what your goal is, or else how are you going to achieve it, right? So there's a technique that many successful people use. It's called a vision board, which is, well, it's a board, obviously. And on that board, they'll put all kinds of pictures and words of things that they want to achieve in life or have happen in their life. So you make this board and you put it somewhere in your house where you'll see it every day, and it will help to remind you of your goals and your passions. So people like Oprah Winfrey, Katy Perry, Cardi B, Steve Harvey, Beyonce, some YouTubers have all said that they use this. You can Google it. They have like testimonials online about how great vision boards are and how they are really confident that these help them to achieve their dreams. And in a way, I think that Jaden kind of had that kind of same effect with Kaigo. So he saw Kaigo every day, or he sees him every day. He wishes that he would be more like Kaigo, and he plays as Kaigo all day, really, truly, every day. And over time, he does gain more confidence. He does become, in some ways, more like Kaigo. So your avatar that you draw today could be like that for you. Now, I'd be remiss to say that all you have to do is look at this picture every day and you'll get to become like that avatar you draw. Obviously, you need to take action. You need to come up with a plan to improve your skills. You need to practice. You need to persevere. Don't give up when it gets hard. I talk a lot about those things in my other school group presentations, but this is Telling Tales. It's a festival. We want to have fun. So for today, let's start by drawing what your superpower could be. So if you want, when it's done, you can consider it your vision board. If you're inspired, maybe this is the first picture for a bigger vision board. If this is all too much for you, then you just want to draw a cool superhero, that is totally fine too. That is cool. So let's get started. So you can base your avatar on a mythical creature like Crossups, but you don't have to. You can just use your imagination. So for example, I have a pre-drawn example by my 9-year-old daughter, Evelyn. Her current passion is to be a marine biologist and save the coral reefs. So I kind of imagine that maybe her human form would be like a scientist, and then when she transforms, what could she transform into? She could transform into giant waves of cold water because the reefs are being killed off by too warm water. The temperatures are rising. Maybe it could be a kraken with all those arms, tentacles, or in this case, we've got Captain Coral. And I think this one's got a sidekick, Carl the Coral Kid. Can you see that? So Captain Coral and Carl the Coral Kid. So, oh yeah, give your avatar a name. Write it on the paper before you send it in to the Creativity Club. That will help us to know what passion it's based on, and awesome names are just fun, right? If you're not that comfortable with drawing, if you're maybe a bit like me, you'd rather write, maybe you take your paper and you're just going to write a description inside, if that's your comfort level. Or if you watch Kevin Sylvester on Wednesday doing his doodling workshop, or Tori Wolcott yesterday, who did her knock-knock jokes and art. They had lots of art tips and doodling skills. I know Kevin Sylvester was drawing the people and circling where their joints are. So you can use those skills today, you know, to make your avatar look more active, more in motion. And then I think they said it's okay to erase. So if you don't like the way it looks after, you can do that too. And if you miss those presentations and you're like, don't worry, they were recorded. They're available, or going to be available to watch on the Telling Tales website. And this presentation is recorded too, if you liked it so much you want to watch it again or tell your friends about it. But basically what I'm saying is I have no drawing tips for you. So you're really going to have to use your own creativity here. But I do want to see what you come up with. So please make sure you send those in to the Creativity Club, which I think Naomi is going to talk about at the very end. So now, Naomi, I think you mentioned that you have some questions for me that were sent in by kids ahead of time. And I was thinking that people could work on their avatar drawing kind of while we're answering those other questions in the background.
That's a great idea. Yeah, so we have some questions from kids in Hamilton, and also some questions from some kids at Centennial Elementary Schools in St. Catharines. So here's your first question. When did you write your first book, and how old were you?
Ooh, so are we talking about published books or any book? Because I think they all count personally.
I think they count too. You could talk about both.
You know, my very first published story, and I can call it a published story, I wrote in grade 1. It was about a leprechaun. Back in those days, in the Scarborough School Board that I was going to school in, they had a book that they published every year where teachers could send in some good stories from their classes. And you see, mine is like on the second page, or first and second page. All the little grade 1 stories are like these little 2-sentence, little 3-sentence paragraph stories, and mine goes on for like half a page. So
that's fantastic.
I was already inspired to write back in grade 1. In grade 6, I co-authored a book with a friend of mine, and then a parent volunteer typed it all out for us. I used to write fake news. Another friend and I, we would make these fake newsletters. I show some really amusing examples of that in one of my school group presentations. So really, like, I started writing very young, and I was an author in my opinion. I had my stuff published, right? But in terms of writing this series, which is my first traditionally published series by a real publishing house, I started writing Tournament Trouble in 2011 when my youngest daughter, Evelyn, was a baby. I was on maternity leave, so I was home a bit more. I certainly didn't have more time than usual, but I think I just needed some kind of creative outlet. And so, yeah, and it was published in 2018. So that was like 7-year process for the first book. So you could say I started writing when I was in my 30s. Yeah.
Yep. Great. And did you know right away, you talked a lot about when you were 6 and writing, did you know from then that this was the right career path for you? Or did it ever take any twists and turns? Did you ever consider doing anything different?
Well, full disclosure, I'm a teacher too, right? Mm-hmm. So writing novels is like my side career. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I knew in grade 1, but then I don't know, life took over and I needed to find, I found that writing fake news wasn't making me any money. So I had to find some actual jobs that paid. So I worked as a tour guide for a museum. I worked as actually a tour guide taking school groups to Quebec City and Montreal. I speak French, so I was tour guiding. So, but then I kind of think back about it now, like a lot of those jobs were about stories, right? Like, what did I do when I was showing people around the museum? I told them the stories of the people who lived there before. And a lot of it was telling these stories to children, because school groups came for tours, families came with kids, and you want to bring the stories to life. I coached gymnastics a lot. Even there were stories. Like, you can't get a 5-year-old to do a warm-up. It's a story, right? We're making pizza, and we're walking across the beam. We're being, superheroes. We're jumping off like Spider-Man. Like, it was all story related. So yeah, and then when I became a teacher, obviously in class, there's a lot of emphasis on stories and reading children's books. It gave me a lot of excuses to read a lot of books that later probably influenced the way I write. Yeah, and I think, if I really think about it, I think I needed all those experiences in order to become an author. Like, working with kids has helped me to make my characters, I feel, a lot more authentic, because if you don't have that contact with the people you're writing about, it's very hard to get the details right, I think.
Right. So everything's connected then. All of the different jobs that you've had, everything connects to stories and kids, and everything comes together?
I think so. Sometimes it might not be the path that you expected, but in a strange way, it leads you to where you needed to end up.
That's great. I have another question. Who inspires you?
Who inspires me? I think a lot of people inspire me. I mean, there are a lot of inspirational people out there. I'm surprised how often I'm inspired by children. Kids can really amaze me. I mean, my own kids, they do things that I certainly would never have. They think a lot more globally than I would have as a child. Like, I have a daughter who is an earth ranger. I mentioned she wants to save coral reefs. She's into donating to organizations that do that. They want to raise money. Like, they like having lemonade stands, and they want to do things like, donate to World Vision to help children around the world. So that's pretty inspiring. And there are a lot of kids like that right now. Like, you keep hearing in the news about Greta Thunberg, who is a climate activist. No one listened to David Suzuki. I mean, I did. I thought everything he was saying was genius. But when he said that we have an issue with global warming, Al Gore made this movie that everyone was like, wow, and then just did nothing. But here we have a kid or teenager speaking up, and people are listening. And I think changes are going to happen. So, Autumn Peltier here in Canada, we have a lot of children. I think this generation inspires me.
Great. That's fantastic. I have another question. In your books, do you have a main message? Like, is there a main message, or is it more, like they're asking, like, is it more that you write for pleasure? Is it more that you're trying to get across a real message to kids? What do you think?
So I write for pleasure. I mean, it's my hobby. I really do write because I enjoy it. But I do find when I read my work back that I see messages. Like, even this idea of the characters in the video game transforming, and how that kind of represents us. I wasn't thinking about that when I wrote it, but it's sort of one of those things that I think a lot of the things that I'm thinking about come across subconsciously in the storyline. I think we all read stories looking for positive, helpful messages. Stories about good people. I mean, Jayden is really just a kid trying to be a good friend, a good person, a good son. But I think that's just, that's secondary. Like, the story is meant to be fun and amusing, and I try to put some humor in it. I hope people find parts of it funny. The things that go wrong with Jaden all the time are, just real life, I think. But yeah, in the end, when I look back at it, I do tend to see that there are some messages that I think I'm kind of proud of too.
Great. And I have two fun questions to end the Q&A from kids. So the first one is, do you play a lot of video games yourself? You talked about your kids playing video games. Do you play video games, or is it more something that you know that other kids are doing?
Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest and say that when I started writing Tournament Trouble, like, no, I'm not a gamer, but I really wanted to write something. Like, I was like, well, if I'm going to write something, I want to get something that will get those kids in my class to read, the ones who are like, oh, I just played video games all weekend, and I'm like, oh, didn't you read any books? So that was kind of just my reason to go into gaming, but I'm not a gamer.
Okay.
I did, however, do my due diligence. I did play Street Fighter online with a very patient colleague of mine. Shout out to Mr. Chan if any of his students are watching, so that I would at least have a good idea of how to play. I'm not going to pretend like I was winning or anything, okay? But I did play, you know, for a while to try to get a good idea of the gameplay. It really helps that I made up my game, Crossups, so that nobody could be like, that's not how you play. I'd be like, well, that's how you play my game. So sometimes that was very helpful. But what I really did, because I wanted to make the tournament authentic, and I knew there were fighting game tournaments, so I actually attended a number of fighting game tournaments here in Toronto. One of them was run by Top Tiers, so there you go, names that come out. So I went to fighting game tournaments, and I was the lady while everyone's playing their games. I was walking around with a notebook and writing down all the little details.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot about the fighting game community. It was really, really interesting, because here are these people who are like beating each other up on the screen, and then they're like so nice and friendly out once they're done playing. Like really, really helpful. I interviewed a number of female gamers for Anyone's Game, which talks a lot about how female gamers are treated in the gaming industry, and they were so helpful, and and very, very open about the experience, because it is different for females and males.
Okay.
But some people will tell you only write what you know, and I didn't know video games, but I think that's not necessarily true if you're interested enough and you're willing to put the research in, and the other thing is, like, yeah, that's the gaming side of it, but that's not the whole story. Like, I don't know video games that well, but I do know, and I don't know how to be a 12-year-old boy, but I do know, that I wanted to be a good friend. I have been in fights with friends, and I know what that feels like when you're a kid. I do know what it's like to not be feeling confident. All those thoughts that Jaden has, the human part of it, that's lived experience. So it's a little different. Yeah.
And then very last question, and this is kind of a fun one. What do you like about cartoon style art, graphic novel style art? Like, what about that appeals to you?
I think it was such a good match for these books, right? Like, it would be weird to have photographs in these books, because they're all about gaming, right? We want to have something, in the general realm of what looks like could be video game art, right? So I don't know that, there's just so much creativity you can do with it. Like, I don't know, I couldn't draw it myself, so, but I was always amazed with what Connie came up with, just because you can have that freedom that it doesn't have to look realistic. So, those Hydra heads that can come out, they can be whatever she wants them to turn into. So, yeah.
Oh, that's terrific. So huge thank you to Sylv Chiang and to Telling Tales for bringing us all together with the Hamilton Public Library. To keep exploring at home, make sure to check out the books by Sylv Chiang in the HPL catalog, and they've been included in our summer reading lists. While you're also there, discover HPL's Summer Reading Club, featuring the 2020 Telling Tales reading lists that are part of our book lists that are featured on the site. Special thanks goes out to the staff and students of Hamilton Wentworth Catholic District School Board and Hamilton Wentworth District School Board for their partnership and participation in this wonderful series of workshops. Please post your illustrations from today's workshop to the Telling Tales Creativity Club on the on the Telling Tales website, and with HPL you can also share on the HPL Make Something. While you're on the site of the Telling Tales site, look for details about this year's Telling Tales bookmark contest. Get your creations in before July 31st, and Telling Tales will announce the winners in each category in the fall. These workshops have been generously sponsored by a number of organizations, and we're very grateful for the sponsorship that makes it possible. Telling Tales wants to connect stories with you all year long. Follow the Telling Tales Dragonfly newsletter for more events, watch for contests, check out the 2020 reading list, and submit your stories and illustrations to the Telling Tales Creativity Club. Happy storytelling, and thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today.